She walked into the dealership wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, inquiring about a luxury car. The salesman looked her up and down with disdain. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place," he sneered, motioning toward the exit. "These vehicles start at $320,000. As staff members chuckled and nearby customers stared, her cheeks burned with humiliation, and she left in silence. The following morning, a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled up to the entrance, and when the back door opened, the salesman's jaw nearly hit the floor. He hadn't seen it coming. Boston Luxury Motors shimmered under the sun, its glass facade revealing rows of exotic machines. Ferraris, Bentleys, Aston Martins, Lamborghinis, each a fantasy on wheels. Margaret Collins, known simply as Maggie, strode inside, her ponytail bouncing as she walked. Her faded jeans, plain white shirt, and minimal makeup reflected a woman who prized authenticity over appearances. At 36, she carried herself with quiet self-assurance, though nothing about her outfit revealed that she was the founder of the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities, a nonprofit that had reshaped the lives of thousands. Years before meeting her husband, Maggie had built it from scratch, pouring her training in special needs education into a mission that created real change. Her eyes fell instantly on a midnight blue coupe, sleek and understated, the perfect gift for her sister's upcoming 41st birthday. After surviving breast cancer the year prior, Caroline deserved something extraordinary, and Maggie had decided she would be the one to give it. The price tag didn't faze her. The foundation's success and her investments had secured her financial independence, though she rarely flaunted it. Across the polished floor, sales manager Blake Thompson adjusted his tie and smirked when he spotted her. With his navy suit tailored to perfection, he considered himself an expert at reading buyers. To him, Maggie looked like someone who had wandered in from the street. He motioned to his colleagues, clearly amused. "Good morning," Maggie greeted warmly as a young salesman approached. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. I'm Daniel. Is there something in particular you'd like to see?" Before she could answer, Blake stepped in, waving the younger man aside. "I'll take it from here, Daniel." His smile was professional but hollow. "Looking for directions, ma'am?" Maggie kept her tone pleasant. "Actually, I'm interested in that midnight blue coupe." She pointed to the $295,000 Azure gleaming on the display platform. Blake's grin stiffened. He dealt with her type before, dreamers. With end-of-month quotas looming, he had no patience. "That's the Azure Limited Edition. Only 14 exist worldwide," he explained condescendingly. "Our serious clients book private appointments to view it. Perhaps I can direct you to our pre-owned section 3 blocks down." His eyes lingered on her sneakers, worn and unremarkable. Maggie remained unfazed. She was used to being underestimated. "I'd still like to see the interior if that's possible," she said with steady politeness. Blake's tone sharpened. "I'm afraid it's not available for casual viewings." Just then, a couple in designer clothes entered, and Blake's demeanor transformed instantly. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, always a pleasure," he said warmly, striding toward them. "Daniel, get her a brochure." Daniel, his oversized suit betraying his inexperience, returned to Maggie with a sheepish smile, embarrassed for his superior's arrogance. "I'm sorry about earlier," Daniel said softly. "Would you still like me to walk you through the Azure?" "I would, thank you," Maggie replied with a polite smile. As Daniel eagerly began describing the specs, Maggie's eyes flicked toward Blake, who was now ushering the Harringtons directly to the same vehicle he had told her was off-limits. With exaggerated charm, he swung open the door and invited Mrs. Harrington to sit inside. "This model has an 8-month wait list, but I've made sure to reserve one for special clients," he boasted. Mrs. Harrington stroked the leather, murmuring that the color wasn't quite to her taste. "Custom options are always possible," Blake reassured smoothly. Maggie stepped closer, close enough to be heard. "Excuse me," she said evenly, "I'd like to inquire about purchasing this model." Blake stiffened, color rising in his face. "As I told you before, this vehicle is currently being shown to these clients," he snapped. "Perhaps you could come back another time, or as I suggested, try our pre-owned lot." The Harringtons shifted awkwardly, caught between the two. I'm specifically interested in this car, Maggie continued calmly. It's for my sister's birthday next month. Blake's smile disappeared. He stepped aside with her, lowering his voice, but not his contempt. I get it. People come here to daydream, but this is a business. That car costs more than most houses. I've been patient, but you're interfering with a legitimate sale. Several customers nearby were already watching, the tension spreading through the showroom. Daniel lingered nervously, unsure whether to intervene. I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today, Maggie said, steady and unshaken. Blake's composure shattered. He laughed harshly, loud enough for half the showroom to hear. A cash purchase? Really? This isn't some garage auction. We're talking nearly $300,000. People who can afford these cars don't show up in. He gestured at her sneakers and jeans with open scorn. Heat rose to Maggie's cheeks, not from shame, but from indignation. For herself and for everyone who had ever been belittled for how they looked. My money spends the same as anyone's, she answered evenly. Blake stepped closer, his tone openly hostile now. Let me be clear. You're wasting my time and making a fool of yourself. Either come back dressed properly for a real appointment or leave. The room had gone still. The Harringtons quietly backed away from the car. Then a new voice cut through. Is there a problem here? Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had approached, drawn by the scene. Blake quickly straightened his tie. No problem, sir. I was just explaining to this woman that we handle the Azure by appointment only for serious buyers. Mason's sharp gaze swept the scene, noting Maggie's attire, the crowd watching, and Blake's smug expression. His tone carried an edge of doubt. I see. And you are? Margaret Collins, Maggie said clearly. Miss Collins, Mason's eyes flickered with recognition at the name. Then perhaps, he said slowly, there's been a rather unfortunate misunderstanding. Well, they understand exclusivity, Richard Mason began carefully, but Maggie's voice was calm, though her chest burned. I understand perfectly. Your sales manager has made the policies abundantly clear. Blake stepped forward, smirking, his tone soaked in arrogance. If you're truly interested, which I doubt, you can schedule an appointment. Bring proof of funds, and perhaps consider dressing the part. These cars, he waved dramatically at the showroom, are for a certain class of people. A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Someone even laughed under their breath. Maggie took in the faces around her, the mocking smirk on Blake's lips, the silent approval from the owner, the unspoken judgment hanging heavy in the air. She had endured discrimination before, but rarely this nakedly, this publicly. I see, she replied softly, dignity intact, though her spirit ached. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, Blake muttered, not quite quietly enough. Some people just don't know their place. Pushing through the glass doors into the sharp sunlight, Maggie drew her phone from her pocket. The sting of humiliation lingered, but so did a spark of resolve, and a small smile tugged at her lips as she dialed. The Collins estate sat quietly on 5 acres just outside Boston, its understated grace hiding the immense wealth of its owners. Alexander Collins preferred it that way. At 41, the tech pioneer had built a fortune revolutionizing renewable energy and advanced storage systems, though he kept his profile deliberately low. When Maggie entered his office, Alexander looked up immediately, reading her expression as easily as he read numbers on a screen. What happened? He asked, moving quickly around his desk. She sank into the leather chair, recounting the morning, the sneers, the humiliation, the way her worth had been measured by her sneakers instead of her soul. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting her speak until she finished with a sigh. It's not about me, she said finally. I can leave and know the truth. But how many people live that every day without the comfort of knowing they could afford what they're being denied? He nodded slowly. This was what he loved most about her, that even when wounded, her heart turned outward to others. So, what do you want to do? She hesitated. Part of me wants to walk away, buy Caroline's gift somewhere else. But then I think of Daniel, the young salesman who treated me with kindness. And I think of everyone who's judged unfairly with no way to fight back. People need to learn that value isn't written in clothes or credit reports. But I don't want revenge, I want awareness. Alexander leaned back, eyes narrowing with thought. Then maybe it's time we gave them both. Maggie arched a brow. Oh, nothing too dramatic, she warned, knowing his instinct to protect her could spiral grand. No buying the dealership and firing everyone. Alexander chuckled. Nothing so predictable, but maybe a little lesson in humility. His eyes glinted with mischief. Education is in order. Together they shaped a plan, not for vengeance, but for enlightenment. Something that could shake perspectives, force people to question the assumptions they'd made so easily. When the details were set, Alexander asked, "Are you sure you don't want to come with me?" Maggie shook her head. "This isn't about me watching them stumble. It's about them learning to see differently, but I expect a full report." As evening fell over the Collins estate, Alexander made several quiet calls, setting the wheels in motion. The following morning, Boston Luxury Motors, and Blake Thompson most of all, would learn just how dangerous it was to mistake appearance for worth. Now let's return to see what unfolded next. The following morning dawned clear, the kind of flawless weather that seemed staged for something significant. Blake Thompson strode into Boston Luxury Motors with his trademark confidence, tugging his blue tie into place. The incident with the casually dressed woman was already just a joke to him, a story he'd repeated over drinks the night before. Another dreamer, imagining herself part of a world she could never touch. Inside, the showroom glistened under the soft glow of strategically placed lights, each exotic car positioned like a piece of art. After finishing the morning meeting, Blake reminded his team of what he considered their guiding principle. Qualify your clients, don't waste time. We serve a very specific kind of buyer. That's not arrogance, it's efficiency. Daniel, the youngest on staff, had sat quietly, discomfort written across his face. Blake noticed and made a mental note to correct the boy's naive approach. At 10:17 sharp, a sound unlike any other broke the monotony. The low, unmistakable purr of an engine that turned every head in the building. Through the massive windows, a Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop at the front entrance. Not just any Phantom, an extended wheelbase, custom finished in a deep midnight blue that shimmered differently as the sunlight caught it. Even Blake, jaded by constant proximity to luxury, felt his pulse spike. Whispers spread among staff and customers alike. The owner, Richard Mason, emerged from his office, curiosity plain on his face. "That's bespoke," Blake muttered, already moving toward the door, easily north of $1 million. The chauffeur stepped out crisply, white gloves precise, as he opened the rear passenger door. From the car emerged a man whose presence filled the room before he even spoke. Tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit that radiated wealth without flaunting it, salt and pepper hair groomed perfectly, his posture confident without effort. Blake's instincts flared. This was the kind of client who didn't just buy cars, he built relationships worth fortunes. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors," Blake said quickly, intercepting him before anyone else could. "Blake Thompson, sales manager. It's an absolute privilege to have you with us." The man regarded him coolly, then offered a polite smile that never reached his eyes. "Alexander Collins," he said simply, extending a firm handshake. The name sparked faint recognition in Blake's mind, though he couldn't place it. No matter. The Rolls-Royce outside already told him everything he needed to know. "Mr. Collins," Blake said eagerly, "it would be my pleasure to personally show you our finest arrivals. In fact, we just received." Alexander lifted a hand, silencing the pitch with effortless authority. "I'm here about one vehicle, the Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake's smile stretched wider, though relief rippled through him. "An extraordinary choice, sir. Only 14 produced this year. I'd be delighted to give you a private viewing. In fact, it's right over." "I know where it is," Alexander interrupted, his tone cutting through Blake's rehearsed charm. "My wife was here yesterday. She expressed interest in it." Blake's grin wavered. "Your wife? I don't recall. Perhaps one of my associates." Alexander's gaze sharpened, his voice cool as steel. "No, Mr. Thompson. You dealt with her personally, or rather, refused to." "Margaret Collins. She was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. You suggested she try the used car lot." The color drained from Blake's face as realization hit, the entire showroom holding its breath behind him. Daniel let out a small gasp, unable to hide it. Mr. Collins, Blake stammered, his trademark smoothness deserting him. There must be some mistake. Of course we welcome all customers here. Richard Mason appeared then, sensing trouble. Is everything all right, Blake? Alexander turned toward him with quiet authority. Mr. Mason, I presume. Richard Mason, he confirmed, extending a hand nervously. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. Alexander inclined his head. Thank you. I was just explaining to Mr. Thompson that my wife came here yesterday interested in the Azure Coupe as a gift for her sister. Instead of professionalism, she was treated in a manner I find deeply concerning. Mason's confident smile faltered. I'm sorry to hear that. I believe I was involved briefly, but I wasn't aware of the specifics. Alexander's voice sharpened. The specifics are that your sales manager made it clear she didn't belong here, judging her entirely by what she wore. By now the showroom had gone silent, staff and customers edging closer, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. Mr. Collins, Blake began again, desperation bleeding into his tone. If there was any miscommunication. It wasn't a miscommunication, Daniel cut in suddenly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Everyone turned toward him. The young salesman flushed but pressed on. Miss Collins was polite, direct and specific about wanting to see the Azure. She was dismissed over and over again only because of how she looked. Blake's glare could have cut steel, but the damage was irreversible. Alexander's gaze returned to Mason. What makes this ironic, he said evenly, is that my wife has spent nearly 2 decades building the Collins Foundation for children with disabilities. She's raised more than $50 million for adaptive equipment, therapies, and education. She dresses simply because she chooses to live close to the families she helps. That's part of who she is, and one of the reasons I love her. The words hung heavy in the still air. Mason's face drained of color. Mr. Collins, please, believe me when I say this is not representative of our values. We pride ourselves on. Values are measured by actions, Mr. Mason. Alexander interrupted firmly, not brochures. He let the silence linger before continuing. Now, as for the Azure Coupe, my original intention was to purchase it for my sister-in-law, as Maggie wished. But I also happen to be in the market for replacing part of our corporate fleet, 7 vehicles in total, and my personal collection could use a refresh. Mason's eyes widened. That kind of purchase would eclipse their quarterly sales goal in one stroke. Blake went pale, swaying as though the floor had tilted. But Alexander continued, his tone colder, I am no longer certain this dealership deserves that level of business. The silence was suffocating. Mason stepped forward, his voice urgent. Mr. Collins, please, I can't apologize enough. This is not how we do business. Give us a chance to prove it. Alexander studied him, then gave a slow nod. Perhaps there is a way forward, but it would require more than a commission or a discount. Mason leaned in eagerly. Anything. The Collins Foundation is hosting a benefit gala next month, Alexander said. We're raising money for an adaptive sports complex for children with disabilities. His eyes cut to the stricken sales manager. I think your presence there would be instructive. Blake swallowed hard. Sir, not as a guest, Alexander clarified. As a volunteer, you'll help set up. You'll assist the children. You'll see firsthand what real worth looks like. Consider it the first down payment on repairing the damage you've done. The meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't about luxury cars anymore. It was about humility and the cost of underestimating the wrong woman. It was never about cars. It was about learning a fundamental truth about human worth. Additionally, Alexander continued, turning toward Richard Mason, your dealership might consider training on unconscious bias. I can connect you with consultants who are excellent in that field. Mason nodded eagerly. Absolutely, we'd welcome such a program. Then Alexander turned to Daniel, the young salesman who had spoken out when it mattered. I'd like you to handle all the paperwork for the Azure. It will be for my sister-in-law. Daniel blinked in shock. Me, thank you, sir. I'd be honored, Alexander replied firmly. Let's sit down and discuss the details for the corporate fleet. But before stepping into Mason's office, he paused beside the coupe, running a hand along the polished surface. My wife has remarkable taste, doesn't she? Behind them, Blake Thompson stood frozen, his carefully curated world shattered. He finally understood that character isn't revealed in how one treats the powerful, but in how one treats those they believe powerless. 1 month later, the Collins Foundation's benefit gala turned the Grand Boston Hotel into a dazzling celebration of possibility. Children with disabilities and their families filled the ballroom alongside donors and advocates. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson, no longer in his tailored suits, but wearing a staff volunteer uniform, directed guests and helped a boy in a wheelchair navigate through the crowd. What had begun as punishment for his arrogance had changed him. At first, volunteering at the foundation felt like a sentence, the price for saving his career. But somewhere along the way, watching the children's determination and the joy they found in their own progress, his outlook shifted. Maggie Collins approached in a simple, elegant blue dress, her grace unchanged by her new recognition. "How are you finding the experience, Blake?" she asked gently. He answered without hesitation. "Humbling and necessary." She glanced toward the boy in the chair. "Thomas seems to like you." Blake smiled faintly. "He's been teaching me adaptive basketball. Apparently I'm terrible at it." Maggie laughed warmly. "He's an honest coach." Blake's face grew serious again. "Mrs. Collins, I know I've apologized in writing, but I need to say it here to you. I'm deeply sorry for how I treated you." "There's no excuse." Maggie's eyes softened, though her words were steady. "You're right, there isn't. The real question is, what have you learned?" He took a breath. "That worth isn't measured by clothes, titles, or possessions. That respect should be the starting point, not a privilege earned after judgment." Maggie nodded. "Those are good lessons, costly ones, I imagine." Blake gave a rueful smile, thinking of the massive fleet deal Alexander had walked away from. "Worth every penny," he said sincerely. Alexander Collins joined them, resting a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Blake was just sharing what he's learned," Maggie explained. Alexander studied him, then said, "I hear you've stayed on with the adaptive sports program." Blake nodded. "Yes, sir. Even after my volunteer term ends, I've committed to staying. And Mr. Mason and I are reworking how we approach clients, no more qualifying by appearances." Alexander's expression softened, then a small smile tugged at his lips. "That's good to hear. Which reminds me, about that corporate fleet I mentioned, we are still in the market. Perhaps you could take care of that purchase yourself," Alexander said evenly. "Daniel tells me you've been mentoring him." Blake's eyes widened in surprise, then softened into something genuine. "It would be an honor, Mr. Collins, truly." Later that night, as the gala drew to a close, Blake found himself watching Maggie and Alexander as they moved through the room, not flaunting status or wealth, but kneeling beside children, listening to parents, connecting with people in a way that was real. He thought back to who he had been just weeks earlier, a man who would have written Maggie off the moment she walked into his showroom in jeans and sneakers. Now he understood that real value had nothing to do with price tags or power, but with presence, compassion, and integrity. Helping Thomas back into his chair after a photo, Blake was startled when the boy grinned up at him. "You know what, Mr. Blake? You're pretty cool for a grown-up." Blake laughed, and for once he meant every word when he replied, "Coming from you, Thomas, that's the best compliment I've had in years." The lesson was clear. We all make snap judgments, don't we? But Blake Thompson discovered that when you look past appearances, you can uncover extraordinary people and moments that change you forever. If this story touched you, hit the subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been misjudged or perhaps judged someone too quickly? Your story might inspire someone else. And remember, true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or luxury goods. It's revealed in how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. See you in the next story, where another powerful lesson awaits.